More than a millennium ago, the Vikings ruled the seas. Their travels took them as far as North America to the west, Russia to the east, and ancient Constantinople to the south. But the greatest Viking ship ever found was discovered on home soil, in southern Norway. Purposefully buried beneath the earth for one last voyage, carrying 2 women on their way to the realm of the dead. This tomb, frozen in time, shattered previous assumptions about Viking society, while throwing up new mysteries in the process. Who were these women in life to warrant such an opulent death?
Best ship, the most horses, the best furniture, everything is the best.
Whoever was buried here commanded a lot of wealth and power.
This is the story of the most iconic Viking ship ever discovered.
The picture shows the excavation situation in 1904, and we are seeing a picture from probably the last part of the excavation. They have been digging down to the ship, removed the burial chamber and most of the objects on the ship. And Gustafsson has his very natural chef pose in the middle.
A year earlier, in 1903, a farmer in Oseberg had come knocking on Swedish archaeologist Gabriel Gustafsson's door in Oslo.
The local farmer who owned the land, he wanted to open it to see if he can find something interesting, and he certainly did.
Gustafsson and his team soon realised this was one of the best preserved Viking ships anyone had seen, and the excitement was not contained to merely the archaeologists.
We can also see that there is a fence and people looking down. This was so popular that they could sell tickets to see the excavation.
Imagine selling tickets these days to come and see archaeologists.
Yeah.
It was, for its time, an absolutely excellent excavation, as this image really does show as well.
Gustafsson, he was good at this, and he was very advanced in the way he saw that documentation was important, and we are very thankful for it.
They had soon uncovered a ship almost perfectly intact, still adorned in ornate Norse art and iconography, and measuring a huge 21 metres long and 5 metres wide.
And how many oar holes were there?
There were 15 on each side, because it's almost 5 meters wide, which means that you need 1 person on each oar.
Or a really big person.
Dating the wood, known as dendrochronology, tells us that the ship was originally constructed in about 820 AD and used on the seas for around 14 years before being buried in 834 AD. Well, with a few exceptions.
Some of the oars that were buried with it were made specifically to be buried. They hadn't ever been used in water.
It was a seagoing vessel, but after it was put down in the earth, it should still go somewhere. So those oars that you mentioned, they were actually placed in the oar holes, ready to turn the ship north. It's so fascinating, just imagine this world of thought.
And incredibly, thanks to the ship being buried in a specific type of clay, it remained full of all sorts of historical treasures that would have typically perished long ago.
15 horses, the 4 dogs and the 2 oxen, 3 really fascinating fancy sleds, and 1 working sled. There is a wagon.
Oh, the wagon is beautiful.
Oh, it's so beautiful.
It's carved with cats.
Yeah.
We love the cats. We do love the cats. The tapestries, the
Yes.
textiles, they were fantastic. Beds and a chair. It's a chest full of apples, buckets and barrels. Kitchen equipment, there's textile working equipment.
You forget the little purse with cannabis.
Oh yes, there's cannabis seeds.
There were some really nice imported, stolen, bought, I don't know, goods.
The list goes on, but suffice to say, this was no accidental burial, and neither was it just a boat full of Viking loot. Imported goods. Because it was about to challenge centuries of assumptions about the Vikings and their society. The 2 skeletons sent to the afterlife with all this treasure were 2 women, sparking years of speculation about who they could be, all of which revealed more about the speculators than it did the women.
The thing is, if you take gender out of the equation, you just talk about the burial, like for like, then this is a chieftain's burial. If you then add gender in, then you suddenly get academics going all up in arms going, oh, but what could it have been? Were they priestesses or were they human sacrifices? But the fact remains that if you just stop focusing on the gender, it's a chieftain's burial.
Best ship, the most horses, best furniture. Everything is the best, the most expensive, the finest.
Conspicuous consumption on a very high level, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes.
Neither of them were young. The oldest has been assessed at about 80, and the youngest in her 50s to 60s, right?
The best age.
Yeah, obviously, yes. The older woman suffered from arthritis, but the shoes seem to have been made specifically for her to cater for her infirmities. Just the mere fact of her reaching the age of 80 shows that she led a privileged lifestyle. So when we talk about what does it mean to have been a woman or a man in the Viking Age, we tend to focus on, you know, the higher status people in society. So we're telling a fairly limited story there. But I don't think there was a comparable experience between what it was to be a poor woman and what it was to be a high status woman. And I think it was the status that mattered more than the gender.
More than a century later, their identities are still a mystery, partly because their remains were too degraded to extract quality DNA, leaving unanswered questions as to who they were or their relationship to each other.
We are getting this personal touch through their objects,
Yes.
Perhaps even more so than through their human remains.
Yeah.
But it's also fascinating because this state of preservation, that there are so many things intact, also gives us more life to the women who were buried there. So they are suddenly living people that you actually kind of care for. The burial itself and also the ceremony of doing it must have been important in the society, also for political reasons, because you need to state this power of maybe the family of the two ladies. And there were some still living relatives who wanted to keep the power and needed this performance to tell everyone.
But the political significance of this iconic Viking tomb wasn't only relevant to 834 AD.
Let's not forget that this was 1904, the year before Norway gained its independence, 1905, from Sweden, and burials were used actively to promote a shared national heritage story that people loved and believed in. So this became a symbol of independence for Norway, and I think that's also quite important to remember.
A grandiose ship burial like this, with all its associated rites and rituals, may seem like it's from another world. But take all that away, and the humans at the heart of these ceremonies may have been far more familiar than they were different, bidding one last farewell to some loved ones.
They had a very different relationship to the realms of the dead, and also a very different relationship with rituals and beliefs. It was much more present to them than it is to us. But even though you might be pleased that you're sending your beloved relative or wonderful ruler off to an equally lovely life in the afterlife, you would still be feeling the loss of them, wouldn't you? And at the end of the day, the people who lived there and the people who made this burial, however much they also celebrated, they also felt grief in the same way that we do, because they are just shared human emotions.